Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gary Dick, coming to you this week from Fort Harrison on the city's northeast side. Actually, this is the city of Lawrence. And for those of you around the state of Indiana, this is in northeast Marion County, about 15 miles northeast of downtown Indianapolis. This is a place with lots of history. It dates back to 1903, when funds were authorized to purchase the land for a U.S. Army base. In 1906, it was officially named after Indiana's own 23rd President of the United States. And it was a busy place in both World Wars I and II. In fact, in 1943, Fort Harrison was the largest draft inductee center in the United States. But the 1991 Base Realignment and Closure Commission recommended that Fort Benjamin Harrison close. And despite the efforts of state and local officials who tried to keep it open, Fort Harrison officially closed in September of 1996. Nearly 1,100 civilians lost their jobs. But it marked the start of a transformation here from military base to live, work, and play destination. In just the past 5 years, there's been more than $200 million in investment here. Nearly 300 single and multifamily homes, with 250 luxury apartments on the way. A new Hilton True Hotel, a $2 million Civic Plaza. There's a YMCA. A new Marion County Public Library will open in June. There's been substantial development around restaurants and retail, all in the shadow of a championship golf course and Fort Harrison State Park. Inside now, the Starrett Center, the new home of Heartland Film, which is also part of an emerging cultural campus here at Fort Harrison. Pleased to be joined by Lawrence Mayor Steve Collier. And Mayor, a lot to talk about here. First of all, the Heartland announcement. I know next week this will be christened, if you will, but the addition of Heartland Film as part of this cultural campus, really important part of this kind of live, work, play area.
Very much a great announcement to be able to make, because it sort of was a surprise when it came out here. We really weren't recruiting them, but we went out there and once we knew they were looking for a new place, we thought what a perfect place for it to be out here. We had spent some money on kind of renovating the Starrett Center beforehand, so when they came out and they made the decision to move out here, that was a big thing for us. It kind of marries very well with the theater at the Fort Theater and the cultural campus. It's creating certainly an environment for certainly culture and art and that kind of history for the city.
A lot of development here we'll talk about in a moment, and the economic impact to be sure. But you were teaching back in the 90s here when the announcement came down, and I was reporting at the time that the fort was going to close. And as a native, you've lived here for a long time. What was that like when that news came out?
Well, it was pretty scary, actually, because those of us who were teaching at the time, we just opened up a second high school not long before that, and so the city was on the cusp of being to grow. The fort had been such an integral part of the city of Lawrence. Lawrence grew up around, Fort Harrison. It had been here since the turn of the century. So when we heard it was going to close down, we were thinking to ourselves, okay, what's next? How do we replace that? And so I'm happy to say that once the FHRA was formed, we began to take strides to be able to truly reuse what was very much a legacy part of the city.
Yeah, I remember some wondered, would this ever be redeveloped? And it certainly has been. You look in just the last 5 years, $200+ million of investment. And I mentioned in the introduction, so many kinds of investment and developments, residential, there's a new hotel, library, YMCA. Kind of put a bottom line on it. What's the impact of this transformation?
Yeah, so actually, I think we've begun to realize this is going to become the new downtown of the city of Lawrence. And so we've worked very hard to make that happen. A lot of the things that come and a lot of the investment in the city certainly provides a type opportunity for people to come in here and to settle. During the pandemic, we went about intentionally making sure and participating in our restaurants that grew up, our locally owned restaurants that grew up. All of those things were happening, and that began to attract even bigger and greater investments. The one that maybe we'll talk about here shortly is the Keystone will be the biggest investment we've ever had in the city of Lawrence, but that'll be joined right next to the library. So those two things alone kind of created what I think is going to be truly truly, like you said, a transformational downtown.
The Keystone Project, $70 million.
Yeah, $70 million.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And this, again, when you talk about live, work, play, and this development here in the city of Lawrence is being held up. So many base remakes, if you will, around the country. This is being held up as an example.
Yeah, we're very proud of the fact that we are actually being, across the nation, we're being held up as this is how a reuse of a government installation should be done. And ours was slow in happening, as so many of them do, but once we got that kind of synergy going, we began to see a lot of economic, people with economic development on their mind wanting to come to Lawrence and talk with them. It was for me, it was a great situation, a great experience to be able to bring in people who had a lot of money and who wanted to put it in the city of Lawrence. That was a big deal for us.
What's next? I know a lot of talk about a new center of the city, really, but as you look going forward, I know you're not running for re-election, right? You'll be out of office. What's next here for Lawrence?
I think that the biggest thing that we'll see happening is we've got the Keystone project going in. We'll put a parking garage in. We've got one more lot that we're going to be pretty picky about what goes in there. I think that there is some interest in maybe putting a medical facility out here that will go along with the number of veterans that we have out here. We still have a military presence out here. We have a couple of the armories and certainly the commissaries, so we'll never lose that. But I do think that as the city continues to grow and mature, is that we'll see a growth and kind of we've got all the apartments built that we want to have. We've got all the houses we need to have in the city center. Now we'll begin to see some truly transformational work in terms of having this cultural center here, in terms of having the Civic Plaza, all the events that we'll host. We're going to be bringing people in, hopefully, from throughout Marion County and throughout central Indiana. All
right, Lawrence Mayor Steve Collier. Mayor, thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to continuing to follow the story of a very much changing area here. Thanks for joining us.
We appreciate you coming out.
All right. Well, growth opportunities here mean more employment opportunities as well. And a new way to get those workers to those jobs, well, the $188 million Purple Line, Indigo's newest mode of rapid bus transit. The route from Ivy Tech in downtown Indianapolis to just south of here at Fort Harrison, under construction for almost a year now, expected to be ready to roll by the end of 2020.